All right, hey VC, I'm Jamie. Welcome back. We are back with another video and back with another friend. It's Chris Friend, our blues guy vinyl. And welcome, Chris. It's wonderful to see you.
Hey Jamie, how you doing, bud?
Doing
How's it
great.
going, eh?
How's it going, eh? And I love your attire. You've got the book in the background, and look at that. Nice.
Well, I know we're both fans of the Habs, so
Absolutely. Of course, our Habs have been kind of sidelined recently with COVID-19 issues and whatnot. So let's cross our fingers that they're going to get
yeah,
back at it.
the A roster and the B roster have been stricken with the coof.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're sticking with the blues for this episode because this is going to be like a blues primer. So Chris, of course, is the Blues Guy Vinyl, one of the great blues channels for blues music, blues resources. And Chris, I know you do a lot of great streams lately. You've had some great live episodes, and you've got some stuff coming up in April that we'll talk about. But thought we'd get together for this one and talk about sort of like a blues primer because
Right,
if someone's not familiar with your channel or even not familiar with the blues, this is just a great way to kind of get your foot wet, get those toes kind of wet, sort of thing. So we thought
right.
we'd present from Chris. If you're looking to get into blues, just some examples of some great blues artists or blues albums that kind of wet the whistle, shall we say? So, shall we
Right.
say?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just get your taste buds salivating,
Yeah. Now, first
if you
off,
will.
Chris, before we get to that, why the blues
Sure.
for you? I mean, there's all the different genres of music out there. There's classic rock, you know, bluegrass. Why is it for you particularly? Why is blues so important?
Um, I don't know. You know what? I would say that's sort of a two-part answer. The first is just I don't know, I guess like how what Ray Charles said about country and western music, I like the stories they tell. Yeah, I like the stories they tell. Yeah, baby. It's kind of that same thing. I love much like country music, or western swing, country and western music. They tell great stories. It's a roots type of music. So even if whether you're just sort of listening to it casually in the background or whether you're actually sitting down and really paying attention to it, you get different levels of the music because it's a very deep style of music. And I think the other thing is just in my family background. My parents were both very, very musical. And my grandfather played country blues on harmonica, and he played spirituals on harmonica in church. So I sort of come by way of through my parents from my granddaddy, and my parents like soul and R&B and B and classic rock, of course. I was pretty lucky. I grew up with parents that listened to hip music. They didn't listen to, no offense, but they didn't listen to Engelbert Humperdinck or stuff like that. No offense to anybody who likes Mr. Humperdinck, but they listened to Ray Charles, and my dad loved the Howlin' Wolf, and
Mm.
they liked funk and all of that too. So, of course, those genres, funk and R&B and soul, are very closely tied to the blues. So it was just kind of a natural progression, really.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
for you, like you're originally from Montreal and then transplanted to Alberta. Was it
right.
growing up in Montreal that, in terms of your family surrounded by the blues, or was that more in your travels through to Alberta?
Mostly in Montreal.
Okay.
I was born in 1970, grew up in Montreal until 1980, and then we moved here to Calgary, Alberta, the summer of 1980. Spent a lot of time as a kid on my grandparents' farm. They had a little small farm, so spent a lot of time with my grandparents and with my granddaddy. I was kind of like his shadow and followed him around. So I that's where I got my initial sort of the hook got me for music was through my grandfather.
Okay.
Then as I got older, got into my 8, 10, 12 years old, the influences of what my parents were listening to. My uncle Michel, who's very French, he was in a psych band, a garage psych band in the late 60s. He played bass. So, kind of through my family, it kind of came that way. And then
Can you
once we
remember
moved
the
out,
Can you remember the name of that band offhand? It was a psych
no,
band. Oh yeah.
no. And then they didn't do any recording. They were just sort of like a party band, and they would play at, community centers and high school
Sure.
dances
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But that's what attracted my auntie to my uncle Michelle, though, and that's how they got together and got married. Was
Oh,
she was starstruck by his coolness playing that bass, right? Uh,
Ah, yes. Ah, yes.
but Calgary has a huge blues scene as well. We're sort of known as Nashville North
Yeah, I
because
was
of
going to
our
ask you about that
country thing.
because Alberta, you're not necessarily thinking of the blues or Calgary, but that's not quite true for that province for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, the blues is really big in Alberta, really big in Calgary. We have a number of live blues clubs here in Calgary that there's two of them. There's five that I know of that are close enough to me where I could frequent them, where I know them well enough. There's five of them close to me, and three out of those five have live blues or rhythm and blues or boogie woogie, either
Wow.
5 nights a week or 7 nights a week, depending on the place. And,
Nice.
and
That is
it's
awesome.
local acts, Calgary, Red Deer, Alberta,
Hmm.
maybe BC or Saskatchewan, maybe as far away as Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So,
And I think of Stony Plain, the record label that's out of
yes,
Alberta, is it not? Yeah. Like
yes,
that's a
yeah, yeah.
great roots label.
Yes, it's very good. And we have a club, it's pretty famous, a blues club in Calgary here called the King Eddie. And I mean, everybody's performed there. Buddy Guy performed there, Jeff Healy's performed there, uh, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, like basically the who's who, Freddie King.
Oh,
Yeah,
those are some big names. My
yeah,
goodness.
for this
Wow.
little joint that holds like 300
Yeah.
people, maybe, right?
Oh my gosh.
Just a dingy little blues club, but and they would stay in the hotel upstairs and play in the blues club down on the main floor. And then
Love it.
off they'd go to Edmonton or maybe Vancouver or whatever. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, well, let's get to it. Let's get to some blues records or some blues recommendation from the Blues Guy vinyl himself.
So I've kind of broken it down to categories. So if you really like, for example, if you're a folkie and you really like singer-songwriter,
Mm,
acoustic stuff, where somebody's just sitting and playing guitar and singing in a very nice voice, and it's kind of a reflective style of music. I would recommend a guy who actually was big on the folk scene, but he pretty much, I would say 99.9% of the time, stayed in the blues. He didn't veer off into the folk scene, but he was very big in that time period. And he
mhm.
hung around with Dylan and Leon Redbone and Joni Mitchell and all of those. And that's John Hammond Jr.
Okay. Now
And
here's an artist I don't know really a lot about. Know the name,
he's
but
yeah, he's great. His father is John Hammond, who organized the From Spirituals to Swing concerts at Carnegie Hall in, I want to say 38, 39, just before World War II.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, so he comes by it honestly. He grew up with the blues. He learned to play guitar and harmonica very, very young. This is his first album, John Hammond on Vanguard.
Okay.
And for the most part, a lot of his albums, it's him singing, playing guitar, harmonica. He'll often wear the harmonica rack like Neil Young or
Oh,
Bob
okay.
Dylan, right? Um, Often he will have guests, but his guests will be pretty deeply rooted in blues too. So he'll have
Okay.
Dr. John, for example, with him on some albums, or uh, these sorts of cats that have been around for quite a while,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, and he covers a lot of Robert Johnson stuff. He covers Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee stuff, which is slightly folk leaning anyway.
Hmm.
And he's got a great, powerful voice. He understands the blues again because his father, being a folklorist and kind of a blues researcher and writer. So he's got the knowledge and he has the authenticity, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
Great, yeah.
So again,
Very good guitar player
it's his
and
voice,
very
it's
good
his guitar
harmonica player.
playing. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Nice.
When he sings, his voice almost cries out in pain, almost like his voice is strained. And to me, it's the blues is all about not only the stories but the feel of it, right? That
Okay.
gives it that authenticity, and he's got that feel to it.
Nice. There
Yeah,
you go. I wouldn't have expected that one right off the top, but that's a great
yeah.
choice. Great
John
choice.
Hammond Jr. is fantastic. I always
Yeah.
recommend John Hammond. And he, speaking of Stony Plain, he's on the Stony Plain label now. He was on
Okay.
Vanguard. Then I think he was with Alligator for a while, maybe, or another label. And now he's on Stony Plain.
Okay. Very
So yeah.
good. So
And
John
he's
Hammond Jr.
from the New England area, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Nice one. Nice choice.
Um, Another one in that same sort of vein, again, mostly acoustic, although he does do some electric stuff, is Texas bluesman Lightning Hopkins.
Okay, there we go. Look
So
at
this
that.
is this is Lightning Hopkins strums the blues.
I
He's a
love it.
Texas bluesman who, in part, learned to play blues guitar from Blind Lemon Jefferson, who
Really?
was sort of the rock star of the 20s and 30s from Texas and recorded hundreds and hundreds of songs, or what we call sides back then. And what Blind
Wow.
Lemon used to do was, if he was going to your town or your city in Texas, what he would do is he would hire a local young aspiring blues artist, a young boy of 10, 12, 14, to guide him around town, because Blind Lemon was blind. And in
Okay.
exchange for that, he would give you some guitar lessons. And if he was there for the weekend, you were his guide for the weekend, and he would teach you some chops in
Oh my
exchange.
gosh. Nice.
So, but
So
Lightning
what?
Hopkins,
Yeah. Now
he's kind
that's
of
a
a
nick.
mix.
Yeah,
Sorry,
he's a name that
go ahead.
comes up a lot, Lightning Hopkins. And so, what
Oh,
is
yeah.
it about Lightning Hopkins? Is it he really, to me, exemplifies that sort of folk blues thing? But what is it? What is that spark from Lightning Hopkins?
I think it's because, I mean, different blues styles have their own identity, right? So Chicago blues is much different than Texas blues, and is much different than St. Louis blues or Kansas City blues. The Texas blues, much like Mississippi or Chicago blues, is very aggressive, but it's got more of that Texas shuffle or boogie woogie sort of feel to it. So for the most part, but not always, but for the most part, it tends to be a little bit more up tempo, has a little more swing to it, and it does have a little bit of country music flavor, just a
Okay.
little sprinkling on there. Um, Lightning Hopkins, also, you can hear a little bit of what you would call hillbilly or rockabilly sort of flavor to his music. Early rock and roll, you can tell that the rockers from the early to mid 50s were sort of influenced by guys like Lightning Hopkins and the way
Mm-hmm.
he played. And this album's great because he does some acoustic, some electric, some where
Okay.
it's just him and his guitar, and then some where he might have a bass player or a drummer or a piano player or something backing him up. So it's a nice blend. And I think this is a reissue, but I think this was his first official LP
Oh,
from, I
was that
think,
right? Okay.
58 or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Because he was prolific. My gosh, there's a lot of Lightning Hopkins
Yeah. And
records
he
out
had a
there, it
great
seems.
voice too. He kept
Yeah.
his sort of southern twang, Texas twang accent to his voice, which us Canadians can really hear, maybe more so than other places where they have trouble sort of differentiating between a Texas southern drawl and a New Orleans southern drawl, for example, right?
Sure.
Louisiana
Yeah.
or something. And I don't know, he's just very cool, great voice, very energetic, and very passionate. Again, when he sings, he's got a lot of power to his voice, and he does a lot of sort of field holler influenced vocals where he almost shouts out or cries out as well. But then
Wow.
he can get very soft and very quiet and intimate. Yeah, he's very
But
versatile, and again, a great guitar picker. Yeah,
okay.
Lightning Hopkins.
Nice. Now, when
Yeah, very good.
it makes me think of somebody like him or somebody like John Lee Hooker, there's a few of those guys that played both acoustic and electric guitar, and
Yeah.
so many of them that have a full band. But do you have a preference, or do you prefer the acoustic or prefer the electric, or don't really like the electric, or is that too much of a loaded question?
Uh,
Because for John Lee Hooker, I guess I tend to gravitate more towards the electric guitar kind of stuff,
yeah,
even Muddy
yeah.
Waters or something like that.
Hmm.
But having said that, I mean, there's just the
Well,
beauty of the acoustic.
well, I don't know. It depends on the artist, really. I like all of Muddy Waters stuff, but I tend to lean more towards his electric Chicago stuff, the stuff from, let's say, 47, 48 to about 1960, when he went electric and he basically had his headhunter band and he was just killing everybody in the Chicago blues scene. But then there's others where I like them equally. Their acoustic or their electric stuff, I like them equally. Guys like John Hammond or Lightning Hopkins. It's very hard for me to say, I prefer Lightning Hopkins acoustic stuff because his electric stuff is so great. And it's still very stripped down. He didn't really often play with like 5 or 7 guys behind him supporting him. He might have 2 or 3, maybe 4 if you throw in a harmonica player or something.
Yeah. Hmm.
But always a little bit more stripped down, much like John Lee was, even though he, in the 70s, he had some albums where he had like 8 guys, in the studio with him. But oftentimes it was John Lee with maybe 2 or 3, or just John Lee by himself, Johnny Hooker, right? So
Mhm.
kind of that same idea. So
Yeah.
yeah, depending on the artist, really depends. Some I'll just take it all. I love it all.
Yeah.
And then others I lean one way or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, and even some artists like Neil Young, like some prefer the acoustic Neil Young, and the electric Neil Young can be a whole different ball game. But
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I don't know. I like it
The,
all. But Lightning
the
Hopkins,
other,
I really think more acoustic. When that artist, it's
yeah,
not an artist I'm familiar with, but Lightning, I definitely think more acoustic than electric.
right. Well, and there's a misconception too that the blues takes this sort of straight line progression, right? Where it starts off as acoustic, and then all of a sudden it goes electric, and then that stays electric.
Hmm.
But there were guys like Leighton Hopkins or John Lee Hooker that were recording electric blues in the mid to late 40s, but they were also recording acoustic blues. So you might have a John Lee Hooker album that he recorded in the 70s that's all acoustic, and it sounds really primitive and old, and his stuff that he did that was electric in the late 40s or early 50s sounds more modern, even though it's older. So you
Yeah.
have a lot of
Okay.
these blues artists that would do both constantly throughout their career. They'd flip back and forth between acoustic or electric. Some of it was the record label saying, hey, your acoustic catalog sells well. We want you to put out an acoustic record. But some of it was just, demand from the fans or the consumer buying public. Some of it was just the artists. They just get inspired for whatever reason. Oh, I think I'm going to revisit some of my old acoustic stuff and re-release them
Mm.
updated, but still keep it, acoustic or down home sounding. Right?
Yeah. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
nice. Well, another great choice there, Chris. That is just amazing. Lightning Hopkins. That is an
Yeah.
artist I really got to explore a lot more because I know a
He's
little
great.
bit, but
Yeah.
not a lot.
Yeah.
For
He's
sure.
very good. Very good.
All right. What
So,
else have you got for us?
well, I thought I'd go with maybe some of the must-haves. Once you kind of go electric and you start kind of making your way up from the Mississippi Delta up into the northern regions, like Chicago, for example. And not every Mississippian went straight up to Chicago and went electric. Some went to Kansas City, as I mentioned. Some went to St. Louis. Some went to Detroit, like John Lee Hooker, and some went to Chicago, right? So the Chicago blues scene was excellent because that was basically the birth of the electric blues, or where it really blew up. Anyways, it was kind of going on in little pockets everywhere, and people were experimenting with electric guitar in the blues and in the 30s and so on. But really, sort of the catalyst was Chicago. That was
Nice.
sort of the destination where a lot of blues players were going. It was just part of that mass migration from the south to the north, from sort of the 30s and through the post World War II period.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
just better jobs, better living conditions, better pay,
Yeah.
and there was already a community there. So it's not like you're moving somewhere where you don't know anybody. You
Right.
might
Yes.
move to a part of Chicago where your neighbor used to be your neighbor down in Leland, Mississippi or something.
Yeah.
You never know, right?
Yeah. Incredible.
So there were guys like, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf that eventually made their way up to Chicago. But one of the must-have guys is Elmore James because he was a little different. He grew up in Mississippi, I think Canton, 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 Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. Moved up to Chicago, and we're all familiar with the story that he worked for his cousin who had like a radio repair shop, an electronics shop. So he started messing around with electronics, and that's how he first got into switching from acoustic to electric guitar. The
Okay.
other thing about Elmore James was he permanently lived in Chicago, but he would often go back to Mississippi, and not just to tour for a week and then go back up. He'd go down to Mississippi for a month or 2 or 3 on end and do all the Chitlin circuit and all the country juke
Okay.
joints and all that down there.
Because
And then he'd
I
go
would
up to,
assume a lot of artists didn't do that. Like, and if they were in Chicago, that they really didn't go down south too much, or is that?
once they sort of got used to being in Chicago and hit it big in Chicago, the only time that they would go back down to the South would be to tour
Oh,
or to
okay.
visit relatives for
Oh, okay.
personal, on a personal trip, right? But oftentimes, you get used to. Don't forget, in the late 30s and early 40s, there was a lot more freedom for the African American in the northern region than there was necessarily in a lot of parts of the South. So you move up there and you get used to maybe being a little bit more free, and you can move around a little more, and there's no Jim Crow and there's no restrictions and yada yada. So to go back down to that would have been
Yeah.
really hard for a lot of them, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So that's why they just said, the hell with that BS. I got to stay in segregated hotels and motels while I'm touring down there.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the
Yeah,
ass. But a lot of them did tour around, because they're promoting their records, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But for the most part, once they're up in the northern cities, Chicago, Detroit, where Kansas City, that's where they stayed.
Yeah.
But Elmore James would go back and forth. He'd be up in Chicago for 2 or 3 months. He'd go back to Mississippi for a month, back up to Chicago for 3 months, back down to Mississippi for 2 months. And he was just, again, a powerful voice. But with Elmore James, I think most people would say it's all about the guitar playing.
Oh my gosh. Red Hot Blues.
Yeah, this is a compilation of his singles. So it's got Dust My Broom and Skies Crying. He covers a lot. Again, another disciple of Robert Johnson. So he covers a lot of Robert Johnson songs, kind of like John Hammond Jr. does too, right? So, I Believe, and, Rolling and Tumbling and all of that stuff. Great voice again. His voice kind of cracks in those higher notes, which to me gives it that feel or that authenticity. You can tell that he's not just going through the motions and phoning it in. He's actually feeling or experiencing what he's singing about.
Yeah.
Great guitar player, bottleneck style, often with a metal slide as opposed to a glass slide or a beef bone or something like that. It helps with the tone that he had.
Okay.
A lot of echo and reverb. That was kind of his thing that he played around with too.
Oh.
And a great drummer in his band too. He had a great sort of backbeat and a cool sort of sped up shuffle rhythms in his stuff.
Now, is it his version of Dust My Broom that is the definitive version? Is that na-na-na-na-na, and that's the shot heard around the world sort of thing in terms of the rock world?
Yeah, I think that there's some recordings that are covers of Robert Johnson's where the cover actually does exceed the original. And I would say Dust My Broom and also Rolling and Tumbling. I think those two, they actually exceed Robert Johnson. Not to take anything away from Robert Johnson. He was a genius. He was an unsung genius of his time. But Elmore definitely outshines him on at least a couple of his cover versions of Robert Johnson tracks for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's that electrified version of those Robert Johnson songs that just was mind-blowing.
Right. And when people say, it's too bad Robert Johnson died at 27, had he lived, I wonder what kind of music he would have done and what he would have sounded like. Probably would have sounded a lot like what Elmore James was doing in the late 40s and 50s, for sure. Maybe a bit like, Robert Nighthawk as well.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of that sort of sound, Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of the precursor to, I would say Elmore James is sort of the precursor to Hound Dog Taylor in that sort of house rock and blues style.
Okay.
Hound Dog Taylor was really influenced by guys like Elmore James, who was, again, hugely influenced by Robert Johnson. So you can see the sort of the tradition and the progression. Right?
Yeah, and I forget Robert Johnson, yes, is part of that 27 Club. That's right.
I think he's the first, going back. I mean, there might have been, I don't know, composers from Vienna from the 1700s maybe that died at 27. But as far as I know, in terms of recorded music, I think Robert Johnson was the first.
Oh, those amazing talents we lost at the age of 27. Incredible.
Yeah. But yeah, I would definitely recommend Elmore James. If you're out there digging and you see anything Elmore James, whether it's an original, whether it's they're reissuing tons of stuff. They have because he was a big influence on the later psych bands like early Fleetwood Mac, for example, right? So
yes, of course. Jeremy
once
Spencer
the word gets out, and then it's like, who's this Elmore James guy? And people start asking for it, so they eventually reissue his stuff, right? So
yeah, it is amazing how many of those blues records made their way over to the UK, and then the rest is rock and roll history for sure.
A lot of them were American GIs bringing their records with them when they went over to when they went over to serve, right?
Yeah, because there weren't a lot of them, like they weren't sold necessarily a lot as imports, so it'd be few of those records, and then somehow they got distributed amongst everybody, and everybody was borrowing everybody's records.
Well, the other two big things that brought the blues to the British listening audience was American Forces Radio and Radio Luxembourg also.
Oh yeah, okay.
They played a lot of American blues and American jazz and rhythm and blues, and of course early rock and roll, or the precursor to rock and roll, what we call hillbilly or rockabilly music.
Yeah.
You know? So they would have
Right.
been hearing all that too, right? And been like, wow. You know? So they would have heard early Elmore James or Muddy Waters or
Yeah.
Howlin' Wolf,
Yeah.
and a lot of the jazz stuff too, the New Orleans style traditional jazz stuff too. They would have heard a lot of that.
Okay. Oh, very good. Oh, we got some great recommendations. This is a great blues primer. Enjoying this.
Let's see. Well, more must-haves, more essentials. You got to get some Howlin' Wolf.
Okay.
I always recommend Howlin' Wolf because for me personally, he's my favorite overall bluesman.
Okay.
He's this is a great reissue, a compilation of his what they call his greatest sides or his greatest hits. So this has a nice combination of his Memphis stuff that he recorded at Memphis Recording Service and later Sun Records, and then he moved up to Chicago and Chess purchased his contract from Sam Phillips.
Okay.
So it's got a nice combination of his Memphis stuff with Sam Phillips and then his Chess stuff from Chicago.
Okay. Now, I wouldn't have guessed Howlin' Wolf was your favorite. I would not have guessed that. I mean, I love Howlin' Wolf, but I would not have guessed that.
You know why? It's his voice, first of all. That's the number one thing for me, his voice. I love that gravelly, gruff, almost mean sounding voice. Again, like you hear him, you're like, this dude has been through some shit. He has seen and heard some stuff in his life.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
And you could tell by the voice. The second thing is that he was just a tremendous harmonica player. You know, the Wolf was like 6'3", like 350 pounds. Yeah, big man.
Big man.
This little tiny harmonica. You get this big booming sound out of this little.
He had, I think, pretty big hands too, as I recall.
Yeah, he had giant, like catcher's mitt sized hands, like bear claw hands. Yeah, like the Wolf holding a regular guitar looks like somebody else holding like one of those little 2/3 scale
or a ukulele.
Practice guitars or ukulele or something. But yeah, he was a great harmonica player. He could get out of that little tiny tin gob box for $2. He could get a big booming sound that matched his big booming voice.
Okay. Now, sometimes with Howlin' Wolf, you don't necessarily think about the harmonica. When you think of, harp players in the blues, you're not necessarily thinking of Howlin' Wolf in terms of top 5. I suppose you should, but, I think of the voice, I think of the sound, not necessarily the harp, which is interesting.
And he was a great harp player, and almost on every recording that he did, I would say probably 80% of his recordings, if you hear harmonica in there, it's the Wolf, more than likely. Yeah, he often would, right there in the studio, he would sing a line, accompany himself with the harmonica, go back to singing. But what's known even less about the Howlin' Wolf is he was an excellent slide or bottleneck guitar player too. And that's something that I only just found out like 10 years ago. Before that, I always just thought the Wolf sang and played harp, and that was it.
Okay.
But he was a great guitar player. In fact, in the back of the album there, you can see him playing.
Oh, yes. That's
there.
Yes, famous photo there. And he was so animated on stage, too. I've seen just a few clips, but he was so animated on stage, which must have been mind-blowing.
That's kind of the third thing, aside from his voice and his musicianship, that makes him my favorite, is he was a great performer, a great showman. I mean, he would crawl around on the stage on all fours like a wolf. He would literally bay or howl up while he was up on stage. There's stories of him taking a beer or a Coke bottle, shaking it up, putting it down his pants, then opening his fly and letting it, when it spurts out because you shake it, letting it fizz out of his open zipper on stage. Yeah, he'd climb up the curtains on stage left or stage right.
Oh my gosh.
There's one show that he did I think it was in Chicago. Pretty sure it was either Chicago or maybe it was Detroit or New York. It was a big city, but and a big venue too, where he drove like one of those little sort of like Honda Trail 50.
Okay, yeah, I've seen photos of that. Yeah,
scooter things on the stage.
Yeah. And he's got like the cap backwards and everything.
Drinking a Budweiser. He was just a fantastic showman, very energetic. He had this funny stage persona of the big bad wolf. I am the wolf, and he was big and mean and physically imposing. But he also had another stage presence where he was fun and jokey and would make funny faces, and he would lick his harmonica
Okay.
and play it. And he would do all kinds of crazy stage antics because he was actually a loving life, fun loving kind of guy.
Mm,
So just the combination of all three of those things makes him
yeah.
my favorite for sure. Just as an overall bluesman,
Yeah.
he's a great entertainer, great voice, great musician.
And that
Yeah,
voice, it's to me, it's that voice. I still to this day remember the first time I heard Howlin' Wolf and was like, "What is that voice?" And
yeah,
the way Sam Phillips talks about Howlin' Wolf's voice,
that's
with
exactly what I
that
was going to
wonderful.
say.
And what is that quote again? It's where the soul of a man never dies, or something like
Yeah,
that, or
yeah, that's it. Yeah,
something to that effect.
yeah,
And it's just from, as you say, it's just from the pit of your soul. It's just
yeah,
an amazing voice, and a voice that actually, in terms of rock, when you think of Captain Beefheart or some other vocalists that really want to
yeah,
kind of try to sound like Wolf, but
yeah.
to be fair, give it a good shot. But there's only one Wolf.
Yeah, there's nobody really that could sound. There's some that could come close or
Yeah,
emulate the wolf, but there's no one that could really match the wolf. And the other thing too about his voice was he wasn't just this sort of powerful, gruff, gravelly type singer. He could also sing very soft, and he could actually hit some quite high notes,
yeah,
especially when he would do his kind of what he called his howl, right?
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because he was influenced by guys like Tommy Johnson from the 20s, no
Okay,
relation to Robert Johnson and a precursor to Robert Johnson. And Tommy Johnson used to do yodels, falsetto yodels in his blues, much like Jimmy Rogers, the white blues singer, did his blue yodels, the singing brakeman Jimmy Rogers.
sure, yeah, okay,
So
yeah,
these
huh,
guys were buddies. Tommy Johnson and Jimmy Rogers were friends. They ran in a lot of the same circles. They both sort of knew a lot of the jug bands from the Tennessee and Mississippi region, like Memphis Jug Band and Mississippi Sheiks, for example. So there's this sort of cross pollination where they would share each other's techniques and they would influence one another.
yeah,
So the blue yodels from Jimmy Rogers became these falsetto sort of crying style yodels from Tommy Johnson, which then influenced the sort of wolf howl of the Howlin' Wolf.
oh
So
man,
it's really neat. Again, you see this sort of progression or this legacy being
legacy,
passed
yeah,
on.
yeah, passing it on. It's all about passing it on, as Keith
Yeah,
Richards would
yeah.
often say. Oh, that's great.
And for me, the Wolf, it doesn't matter. His Memphis recordings, his Chicago
Yeah,
recordings, it's all good. I mean, if you come across a bin, let's say, and it's got 10 Howlin' Wolf records in it,
grab
you
them.
could just close your eyes and randomly grab one and it'll be good.
Yeah,
Yeah, grab them all. But I mean, you could just blindly grab one and it'll be fantastic
yeah.
for
No,
sure.
I would have to agree. Yeah, he's
Yeah, yeah.
he's one of the greats
Amazing. And
for
very
sure.
influential. He was one of those guys that influenced, the British blues rockers that would bring it back.
Oh, for sure.
Wolf was one of those pivotal guys. He was a huge influence on, Brian Jones, and he was a huge influence on Paul McCartney and George Harrison, of course, John Mayall, and all those cats,
Yeah,
right? So
Cream
Alexis
guys,
Corner,
Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, Clapton, and all of them. Yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely.
very nice. Oh, love the Wolf. Love the Wolf.
Got to talk about the
Okay,
Muddy Waters.
okay.
I'm pretty sure on Air Channel I can show some CDs, which I don't show often. So what the hell? Let's show some.
I never show CDs, but go ahead.
No. But yeah, Muddy Waters, man. Basically the king of the blues. The man. I call him the man. Again, a Mississippian. Went up to Chicago. Well, first he went to St. Louis. Didn't do so hot because he didn't have any connections in St. Louis.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
So
that.
so he was only there for a very, very short time. I think a matter of weeks or maybe a month or two.
Okay.
And then he went back down to Clarksdale, Mississippi,
Oh,
and
wow.
worked
Okay.
a little more. I think he was a truck driver for Stovall's plantation. So he moved back, worked a little longer, saved up a little bit more money, and then moved up to Chicago very, very shortly after in that same year.
Okay.
Because he did have a connection in Chicago, which was Big Bill Brunsey.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
And
very good.
so that next thing you know, he goes from recording those Library of Congress recordings, those
Yeah.
field recordings, literally on the front porch of his grandmother's sharecropper shack on Stovall's plantation. And within 3 years, he's up in Chicago recording hit records for Aristocrat that's later becomes Chess Records. It's
That was
amazing.
within 3 years since those recordings, from roughly about 3 years from those recordings
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
wow. I had no idea. Wow.
those
That's
recordings
amazing.
were
It's so
uh,
wonderful that those recordings were captured, like those field recordings, the National Congress. So wonderful that they were
yeah,
captured.
yeah, those ones with Son
Oh,
Sims. Yeah, they were recorded in 41 and 42, and by 45, 46, he was in
he
Chicago
was
and
okay.
was already performing in Chicago and was already well on his way to getting into chess. He actually recorded for Lester Melrose with CBS first.
Okay.
Did a couple of songs that weren't released until way the hell like in the 70s or early 80s or something.
Isn't
So it
that
was
something?
so
My
technically
gosh.
his first recordings that were released were Aristocrat through Chess,
Yeah.
but he actually recorded I can't remember if it's CBS or ABC, but whoever Lester Melrose was with. I want to say it was ABC Records, but yeah.
Right. But oh, they seem like a world away from those field recordings too then. Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing? Just well,
yeah,
space of 3 years plus. Wow.
yeah, 3 to 5 years
Oh my
basically.
gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, Muddy Waters, of course, huge. I
Oh,
mean, a huge influence, and he's what I call the bridge. He's the guy who takes those acoustic songs that he was literally playing on the front porch with just him and his guitar,
yeah.
and moves up to Chicago, and basically in 3 to 5 years' time, plugs in, goes electric, playing those a lot of times those exact same songs,
Yeah.
just up tempo, still
Yeah.
just him and guitar, but now it's electric guitar. And then later on, he adds a stand up like slap bass, and then a keyboard player. And then next, he brings in a harmonica player and then a second guitar player. Next thing you know, it's the Headhunters, this band that's destroying everybody in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
then
Oh,
people overseas start hearing about him because a lot of these old 78s that these blues artists, especially really successful ones early on, like Muddy Waters, these 78s are being reissued now on LPs in the 50s and 60s, and they're categorized as jazz,
yeah.
especially in England, in the UK, and in some parts of Europe too. They're for some reason they're called jazz, even though it's Muddy Waters.
Oh, yeah. It's as blues
So
as you
then
can get.
he gets invited to the Newport Jazz Festival
Ah,
in 1960. Not
very good.
the Newport Folk Fest, but the Newport. Well, he performed both,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
initially the Newport Jazz Festival, and everybody talks about how Bob Dylan pissed everybody off in the crowd at the Folk Fest when he went electric. Muddy kind of shocked everybody doing the same thing at the Jazz Fest. They were expecting him to play his acoustic guitar stuff. And
Okay.
then he comes out with his 5-piece band, electric. James Cotton on harmonica, Muddy already plugged in with his electric, playing his bottleneck, and it just completely bamboozled everybody, and just everybody was just completely awestruck. And he
Okay.
basically turned it into a big blues house party, is what an outdoor blues house party is what he turned it into.
Yeah. Now, did they were shocked, but was it well received? Like,
It was
obviously
at
Bob Dylan
first it
shocked, and
was
they were like, "Ugh."
yeah, Bob Dylan, they were hauling out
Yeah.
names
Yeah.
like
Or there was some.
sellouts, and
Yeah.
yeah, at first the shock for Muddy was just kind of the unexpectedness of it. It was like the oh wow, oh, but people were like, oh yeah, come on, this is great.
Okay.
And then, of course, Paul Butterfield did the same thing too at the same festival.
Right.
So
Okay.
it wasn't necessarily a one-off, but the thing is that there was this expectation that Muddy was going to come out and maybe wearing like denim overalls and sit down with
Yeah.
his old
Yeah.
beat-up guitar and play some of those songs from those Library of Congress recordings, maybe. But then no, he comes in and sings "Got My Mojo Working," and it's a danceable
Oh.
beat, and the camera there's footage of the camera panning to the crowd, and people are up literally dancing
Okay.
and just having a great time. The band members are dancing in the background. James Cotton's go crazy with the harmonica and dancing. He's
Oh.
got Otis Spann on piano by that time, so just
Oh.
a great show, a historic show, and
Yeah.
that's what really put Muddy over to the white audiences.
Okay.
Because prior to that, he was pretty exclusively African Americans were buying blues and rhythm and blues, the Chicago stuff, and that was probably 95% of the buying public of fans of Muddies were African Americans. But after the Newport, then it was he
Yeah.
crossed over is the
Yeah.
term, and then it's about 50-50 black and white audience. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
so that was
interesting
his big thing.
in some of those early days. It's that right appearance at the right concert or right festival that now it seems it's much more the right appearance on maybe a TV show or an award show that captures. But
Yeah,
back then it was really more the concert. If it was that right festival or concert that could
yeah,
make such a huge difference in the
sure.
careers.
Like for example, Santana at Woodstock,
Yeah.
right? I
Hmm.
think wasn't that their first live show?
Pretty much. Yeah. In terms
Like
of
their
a
first live concert.
big one. Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
maybe
Absolutely.
not their first live show. I mean, they
Yeah.
played small shows, but I mean, in terms of a big,
Exactly.
music festival and live
Yeah.
audience show, you know, it's amazing sometimes. And like you
Yeah.
said, that could be the catalyst that all of a sudden just and they
Boom.
go to the
Yeah.
stratosphere, right?
Exactly. Okay. My question: the Muddy Waters Howlin' Wolf rivalry. Was it a rivalry,
No,
or was it all just?
no, it was that
I don't
was
want to say fake news.
it was kind of fake news. It was there was a friendly rivalry or a friendly competition because that was sort of the attitude in a chess,
Okay.
but it was playful. It was like, oh,
Record hype.
yeah, Chuck Berry got 2 number 1 hits last month. Huh? What are you guys going to do? Right, and a lot of it was Leonard Chess because not only don't forget Leonard Chess was a Polish Jew, so he was used to being he was used to racism himself, being bigoted against. So he didn't think that way. He didn't have it, much like Sam Phillips didn't have a separate entrance for black and white artists. Same thing with Leonard Chess. There's a joke that Sam Phillips didn't care about color unless it was the color green. Same thing with the Chess brothers. They didn't care about your color so long as you could make that money,
Yeah.
make
It's
money
business.
for them and for yourself, right? So, but the thing is, after a while, the Chess roster became like a family. You had guys that they stuck around Chess for a long time, and Muddy and Leonard were actually personal friends. So, and then Willie Dixon comes along, and he sort of starts bringing in other musicians into the fold, and it becomes this sort of a friendly competition amongst family members.
Sure.
You have Eddie Boyd, you have Sonny Boy #2, and you have the Howlin' Wolf. You have the Howlin' Wolf and Muddy, because when the Wolf joined Chess, Muddy was pretty much the top guy.
Right. Okay. Okay.
No one could touch the Mud,
Mm-hmm.
not only in record sales, but just in blues club appearances, especially in Chicago.
Okay.
Muddy Waters himself quoted as saying, you know, if a record came out good, all you had to do is hang a sign above your door. It says Muddy Waters playing tonight. Sold out. Sold out. So there was a friendly competition, but it wasn't a rivalry. They didn't hate each other. In Cadillac Records, there's a scene where little Walter pulls a pistol out to kind of intimidate the Wolf while the Wolf's in the studio recording. That didn't happen. That's not true. That's just dramatic embellishment. But yes, there was a friendly competition, but it wasn't a rivalry.
Yeah, it reminds me of Motown Records. I mean, there's lots of stories in terms of just the friendly competition because everybody was always striving to get that hit record, and with the writers, and then who wants to jump on this and get the hit record? Like, so it's that friendly competition within the business of trying to get that #1 or trying to get the big seller sort of thing. So
and to be honest, once Chuck Berry came along, the whole thing with Muddy and the Wolf took a backseat because Chuck Berry overtook and became their #1 guy for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's where you hear stories of Leonard Chess siphoning money from Chuck Berry's royalties and using it to write checks for Muddy Waters.
Okay.
Because Muddy Waters at that point was starting to sort of get on the decline, and he hadn't had his sort of rediscovery yet.
Sure.
Where the rock and roll kids hadn't picked up on Muddy Waters yet. Right, so there was like a 5 to 6, 7 year period where he was putting out stuff, but nobody was buying it. And Chuck Berry was the guy. So that whole Wolf Mud thing ended up taking a whole back seat, because then it became all about chasing the leader, and that leader was Chuck Berry. Right?
Yeah,
So
with Bo Diddley, I would imagine not too far behind in terms of sales and the way things were going with more rhythm and blues and rock and roll and
yeah,
that sort of thing.
yeah. The thing with Bo Diddley, though, is that even though he was a fantastic, like an outstanding guitar player, was he would often employ Muddy to in on his recording sessions to play second guitar and get a nice bottleneck sound
Oh,
going.
okay. I didn't
And he
know
would also often bring in little Walter to play harmonica.
that. Oh,
So
okay.
there was, even though again there was that competition there, a little bit of a friendly competition,
Yeah.
they would still support each other. So would play guitar on such and such's record, or little Walter would play harmonica on this guy's song, or whatever, right? So
Okay.
of
Oh,
course
very good.
Willie Dixon always in the background,
Yeah.
always,
Writing amazing songs. Oh,
and producing
yeah,
and
yeah.
arranging.
Mm-hmm.
Like Willie Dixon, I think, was one of the earliest African American guys that was actually behind the mixing board and like calling the shots and saying, "All right, take two," and cut, do it again. Like Willie Dixon was one of the first guys to do that. Plus, a songwriter, as you said,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
a musician himself,
yeah, yeah,
session guy, and a lead musician,
yeah.
songwriter, promoter, talent scout. Yeah, he was ahead of his time. He was a
Renaissance
modern
man.
day renaissance, exactly. So
Very
yeah,
good.
Muddy Waters. Yeah, anything that you see Muddy Waters,
Mm-hmm.
you can pick it up with confidence. Even his more recent stuff in the '70s and '80s, stuff he did with Johnny Winter producing.
Johnny Winter
This,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is King B. But yeah, there's a great shot of Muddy and his wife and the kids.
Nice.
But yeah, Muddy Waters definitely a must-have, just like Elmore James, just like the Hollow Wolf. You got to get some mud, for sure.
Got to get some mud. Got to
Get the
get some
mud.
mud.
The mud. Who else? Well, we might as well stick with chess. Talk about my favorite harmonica player real quick,
Okay.
since we're talking about harmonica players. A couple more CDs. Sonny Boy Williamson, #2.
Okay.
His real name was Alec Miller. He was known as Alec Rice Miller, but he started using the name Sonny Boy Williamson in the late 30s. But there was already a Sonny Boy Williamson, the original Sonny Boy Williamson, who had already moved up to Chicago in the 30s and was recording. And his name was John Lee Williamson. So he's known as Sonny Boy #1. The Sonny Boy I'm going to show here, who was eventually went to chess, was Sonny Boy #2, Alec Rice Miller. So
no relation or anything like that.
No, not at all. He stole his name basically, and covered a lot of his songs. But this is the real folk blues. It's not folk blues at all. It's straight up Chicago blues.
Oh, okay.
This is just chess trying to be clever and
capitalize. Part of their series, yes. Okay.
Trying to capitalize on the folk resurgence of the '60s, right? So the Muddy Waters had some albums called Real Folk Blues. The Wolf also had albums, folk blues, yada yada yada. It was just a title to capitalize. So, but it's definitely very much Chicago blues. A great singer. He started in the South. He had his own radio show called the King Biscuit Flour Hour, where he was the host of the show. And then eventually they came up with a Sonny Boy Flour named for him. And then it switched to the Sonny Boy Flour Hour. And it was a variety show over the radio where he and his band would play a couple songs, then he'd do some flour commercials. Maybe he'd have a guest come in, and then they'd do a few more songs, do some more commercials, and it would take about an hour. And then that was the show. And I think it was on Saturdays, if I'm not mistaken. And it was WDIA out of, I want to say, Arkansas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But then eventually he catches on. He's touring everywhere and moves up to Chicago. And Willie Dixon, again, hey, man, why don't you come over to chess, man? And basically, Leonard already knew who he was, signed him on the spot, and started recording for chess.
Okay.
So again, another guy that if you see his stuff, you can buy it in confidence. You don't have to worry about sampling it first, or I'm going to stream the song and listen to it first to make sure. No, if you see Sonny Boy #2, pick it up.
Okay, sure. Now is Sonny Boy Williamson, was he also influential with the Yardbirds? Was he one of the artists that they recorded with? Or
yes, in fact, I do have an album. Yes, Sonny Boy with the Yardbirds. Yes, yeah, he did some
So did
live.
he spend some time in the UK then with the Yardbirds,
Sonny
or how did that work?
Sonny Boy went to the UK a couple of times.
Okay.
In the First of all, in the 50s, you had Muddy Waters go over with Otis Spann. You had J.B. Lenoir going over in the 50s. You had Big Bill Brunzi. He was one of the earliest to go over in the early
Oh, okay.
50s.
Yes. Yes.
Sonny Boy went in the 60s when they started having these sort of blues packages go overseas. And it was a German by the name of Horst Lippmann, who was a TV producer. I think he was a music producer as well. And he arranged to start bringing over some of these blues artists, 6, 8, 10, 12 of them at a time, to perform for German TV, and he would film them. And then this was put on TV and then later on released as a DVD series.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Wow.
So Sonny Boy went over there a couple of times, very well received. In fact, he said to man, I'm treated better over here than I am back in my own home country.
Yeah.
So one time he went over there on his own, and he actually stayed for quite a while. And he lived there for a while, recorded a few albums over there. Went to Savile Row and had like a tailor suit made, bought himself a briefcase to throw all his harmonicas in, started billing himself as Sir Sonny Boy Williams,
Okay. Oh.
saying that he had been knighted by the Queen because he was a big bullshitter.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love it.
But yeah, and one of the some of the cats he hooked up with were the Yardbirds. And
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
he did. I think he did 2 albums with the Yardbirds, and I think he also did one with the Animals too, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But yeah, Sonny Boy definitely again worth scooping up.
Sure. And it's interesting too when you have somebody like Sonny Boy or BB King. It's a few of those artists that had that sort of radio connection. You know, they had either a radio show or a radio host, and then kind of carried on. So you got the real folk blues and more folk blues.
Yeah. These are 2 of the best because their concept is really, really good stuff from Chess. Some acoustic stuff, some electric blues stuff, but very much in that Chicago vein. He's going to be backed up by Matt Guitar Murphy. He's going to have guys like Lee Dixon on bass playing for him, Robert Lockwood Jr. on guitar, just depending, right? So, nice. Yeah.
Very good.
Sunnyland Slim or Memphis Slim on piano often as well. So yeah, definitely an essential guy. One of those guys that's not as well known as the Wolf or the Mud, but definitely I would say essential listening.
Yeah, but as you say, not as well known, but my gosh, what he did here and then crossing over to the UK, influencing all of those guys over there, like that's amazing. Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
And you're right, a lot of these guys got their start in radio. BB was a DJ. And often did the same thing as Sonny Boy number 2, Alec Miller was doing. Perform a few songs, do some commercials, do a couple of more numbers, talk about, I'm going to be in such and such club on Bill Street this Saturday night. Then he'd play a couple more songs and end the show,
Right, yeah. Isn't there the classic story about BB King that he did some thing or was sponsored by a cough syrup that was something like, it was like 18% alcohol or something like that.
Yeah, it was Hadacol, and they said to him, can you sing any jingles? And BB said, yes, sir, I can sing some jingles. And BB even said himself, man, I'll do whatever the hell you want if you just pay me.
Sure.
So they said, okay, well, we need a jingle for this Hadacol. So on the spot, he came up with Hadacol sure is great. Hadacol sure is great. Hadacol sure is great. Take it every day and you won't be late or something like that, right? And then they're like, you got the job. And like, that's all it took. Yeah, nice. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, but it was like 18% alcohol or something like that. This cough syrup was just ridiculous. You forgot about your cough if you had a full bottle of that stuff.
A lot of times these health tonics were just that. They were just booze. Right? Yeah. So, like those tonics that they used to sell at the medicine shows in the 1920s. It was just booze.
Yeah.
With maybe tobacco juice in it and who knows, turpentine in it and whatever the hell they would do.
Yes, your child will get a good night's sleep.
Might not wake up the next day. You wake up the next morning and find your own self dead, as they say in the blues.
There you go. Well, these are some great primers. Do you have any more, or any more?
Yeah, a couple more if you don't mind,
Yes,
if you're not
please.
running too long.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I got to talk about my favorite blues guitarist who was at one point another Chess family member, and that's Mr. Buddy Guy.
Okay. Yes.
Buddy Guy, this is a great compilation of his chess stuff.
Ever
Um,
seen that one?
I I tend to prefer his early stuff, his 60s and 70s stuff. He anything that for me, because he's my favorite blues guitarist, anything that he's done, I
Yeah.
love, and I have his whole discography. But I tend to lean more towards his, let's say, 1980 and prior. And
Okay.
his first record, his first official recordings were 67 and 68 through Cobra. He did some stuff with Chess as a session guy. He wanted to do like solo stuff, but he was too wild. He was too wild even for Chess. And they said, whoa, whoa, man. And they kept trying to reel him in all the time. And Buddy got pissed and went to another label. He went to Vanguard for a while. And then he blew up. Then the blues rock thing, like Jimi Hendrix, blew up. And then Leonard Chess said, oh, man, we really screwed up. They brought Buddy back and they said, you know what, you were
Okay.
right and we were wrong. Do your thing. And the reason why Buddy's so different and was so wild back then is because he's not a Mississippian. He's a Louisiana bluesman. He's from Lettsworth, Louisiana. And those New Orleans area Louisiana bluesmen are on a whole different level of wild. They were wild
Okay.
childs. And Buddy Guy was a wild child. And when he got together with Junior Wells, the harmonica player and great singer as well, this was a Chicago blues dynamic duo that took the world by storm. They ended up opening for the Rolling Stones for many years. They did all kinds of uh, blues festivals, Chicago Blues Festival. They did the Monterey Pop Festival. They did what's that big one over in Europe? Name escapes me right now. The French one,
Oh, the
or the
French one. I don't
Belgian,
know.
or the Belgian one, or anyway,
La
doesn't
Blues de
matter.
Festival.
Yeah, who knows? Festival du Blues.
I
But
was thinking,
anyways,
I was thinking
but
Glastonbury, but no, that's not quite.
no, I've got it down here. I
Or
don't
the
want to dig through it.
yeah, Montreux or
But
something like that.
Buddy Guy, amazing guitarist. If you like Jimi Hendrix, you'll really like Buddy Guy.
Yeah. Oh,
Just
what a
amazing
career.
bending.
Oh,
He's one of those guys that he can do both. A lot of times they say, why play three notes when one note will do? So oftentimes there's a complexity in the simplicity of just hitting one note, but you're expecting to hear, but he doesn't do it. And
yeah.
then other times when you think, oh, four or five notes in there would be nice, he'll throw in 20 notes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
you're like, well, how does this guy manage to balance these two different styles, but do it in a consistent way? And his playing is clean, but dirty and sloppy and bluesy at the same time, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah. No, I hear you loud and clear.
You
Now,
know
in
what I
terms
mean?
of Buddy Guy and Jimi Hendrix, I mean, I hear so many stories that Buddy Guy is a better player, was a better player than Jimi Hendrix.
Mm.
Others, I mean, it's very subjective,
Oh,
obviously.
and you're kind of comparing apples to oranges in the sense that Buddy's kind of blues rock, but much more skewed to the blues, whereas Jimmy was kind of blues rock, but much more skewed to rock. But
Sure.
so it's, it's hard to say. It's comparing apples to oranges. It's very tough. Personally, I prefer Buddy Guy, but I
Mm-hmm.
just happen to prefer the blues. It's just my favorite
Yeah.
genre of music. But Buddy Guy was definitely a big influence on Jimi Hendrix, for sure. And Jimi Hendrix has said that himself
Yes.
many, many
Mm-hmm.
times.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an old video of Buddy Guy playing at some outdoor festival. And he's playing guitar and he's going through some crazy solo and he's just doing this with his head and his eyes are closed. And it's in the 70s and early 70s, maybe even late 60s. I don't want to say maybe between 69, 71, somewhere in there.
Sure. Yep.
He's just going nuts. The camera pans over. Who's in the crowd? Jimi Hendrix. He's like one person back from right at the stage, and he's looking up, and he's kind of bobbing his head too. Buddy calls him up on stage to do a little jam together, and it's
Okay.
excellent.
Oh my gosh. And
Um,
to be fair, Jimi Hendrix really gave props. Like everybody's always wanting to compare Jimi Hendrix to this guitarist or think that there were these rivalries. But Jimi Hendrix, as you mentioned, thought Buddy Guy was great. He always gave props to guitarists that he enjoyed or was influenced by.
yeah, he was always very good at saying, hey, Muddy Waters this, Buddy Guy that.
Hmm.
Hell, what's his name from Mahogany Rush, the Canadian guy?
Sure, Frank Marino.
Frank Marino, another one that Jimmy loved. So yeah, Buddy Guy definitely one of those. And Buddy, much like Muddy Waters was the bridge from acoustic to electric blues. Buddy is kind of the bridge from blues to rock and roll. He's that guy that bridges that gap from blues to blues rock or rock and roll, because he hung with the rock and roll guys like the Stones and all of them cats, but he also was a bluesman and hung out with like Junior Wells and Muddy Waters and all them cats too. So he kind of he had one foot in both worlds, but he was definitely a, more than anything else a bluesman, and he's
Yeah.
definitely my favorite blues guitarist. Some of the bending that he does on that guitar,
Oh.
amazing stuff. And on record is totally different than live. I've told
Mm.
stories about seeing him live, I think 4 or 5 times. I've seen him play Voodoo Child with one hand, just playing it one hand, using a drumstick as a slide, using a
Oh.
towel because he'd get all sweaty, so he'd wipe his face with a little towel, and then he'd like whip the guitar strings with the towel and play it. Of course,
Oh.
play with his teeth behind his head,
Oh.
which goes way back to the 20s.
Oh my
Amazing,
gosh.
just
Yeah.
another just incredible performer and stage presence, and just
And
a little
who's and
bugger
who's
too,
had
like five
such a
six.
and who's had such a long, long career and still at it.
Yep.
Do you like his? So you like the chess stuff, sort of pre-80s, but you've got a lot of his like fairly recent albums and things like
Oh, I
that. Do
have
you
all
like
of his
his
stuff. Yeah,
90s? Like
yeah, I do.
he was on. Is he still with Jive, or he was on Jive for a bit? I might be getting my labels not quite right,
He
but
was on.
it
Well,
might
he
not be
was
Jive.
he
I
was
can't
on
remember which.
Chess as a session guy. Then he was on
Yeah,
Cobra. Then Vanguard. Then Chess as a solo artist on Chess. Then he went to.
he's been on so many different
He's
labels.
been on a couple of labels. Then he went on to Silvertone, which is who he's on now. Is
Silvertone,
Silvertone.
maybe that's what I'm thinking of
Yeah, yeah.
more.
And
But
Buddy's won a lot of Grammys too. He's won
yeah,
quite a few Grammys. Blues Single of the Year, Blues Album of the Year, that kind of thing. And much like any other well-rounded blues musician, he'll do acoustic, stripped down, primitive country blues stuff, and then he'll do songs where it's electric, crazy in your face, face melting, mind blowing solos, lots of bending again. So he's just one of those really
mm,
well-rounded bluesmen, and he's a very good singer too,
yeah,
especially in his younger days.
yeah.
But yeah, I do like his modern stuff too, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Oh, very good. Yeah, and still as good as ever for sure.
Oh yeah, still recording, still touring.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he turns 83 this July. I think
Is that right? Oh my gosh.
82, 83, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh,
Good friends with Muddy, good friends with BB.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and good friends with my next must-have Chicago guy, and that's Junior Wells.
Junior Wells.
My second favorite blues harmonica player after Sonny Boy number one.
Okay.
Um, Great with Buddy Guy as a duo, but outstanding on his own as a blues artist too. This is his first solo album, Hoodoo
Okay.
Man
Very
Blues, recorded for Delmark. That's the
nice.
other label that Buddy was at for a while. Sorry, it was Delmark. Buddy was
Elmer.
there
Okay.
for a while.
Very
He's got the
nice.
famous Snatch It Back and Hold It, and Hoodoo Man Blues, of course. Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, Chitlin Con Carney, just like all the classic blues hits. An amazing harmonica player. He was a
Nice.
sideman as the harp player in Muddy Waters band for a while after Little Walter left. In fact, there's still some arguments in blues forums online as to, well, who's playing harp in that one Muddy song? Is that Little Walter or is that Junior Wells? Because he could copy Walter's style quite well. And it was later on when he went on his own that he developed his own signature sound. And,
Okay.
and the thing about Junior's from I want to say he's from Arkansas. Then he went to Memphis. Then he went up to Chicago. quite young. I think he was 15 when he got his first harmonica and moved away from home. Um, but his style of blues is a little different. It's Chicago blues, but he's got more of a funk influence, especially in his vocals.
Okay.
He very much revered James Brown's band and the way James Brown sang. So he kind of adopted a little bit of that early James Brown kind of style to punctuating the way he
Okay.
sang.
Wow. So that
And
brings in a whole different influence to the blues right there.
yeah,
That's fascinating.
yeah, and just incredible. And again, Junior Wells, his Delmark stuff, his Vanguard stuff, stuff he did with Buddy Guy, stuff he's done on his own, doesn't matter. Anything you see from
Anything you see
Junior,
from Junior Wells.
I
Okay.
would recommend for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now it's
got a few
interesting.
live
So,
albums.
so
Oh, it just popped in. Sorry to
go ahead.
interrupt.
No, go
It
ahead.
just popped into my head. The Montreux Festival was the one
Montreux,
that
yeah.
That's the one. That's the French one I was thinking.
One of these days, Chris, you and I are going to Montreux for sure.
Yeah.
One of these days. Now, it's interesting, Junior Wells, especially with the Buddy Guy, but Little Walter's not number one on your list for harp players. Now, when you think of blues harp, I would say most people think of Little Walter, but Little
Yeah.
Walter doesn't quite rate as high on your list.
No. He's right up there. He's a top 5 guy for me personally. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much because I do have a video coming up where it's my 10 favorite blues harp players,
Harp players,
blues,
okay.
blues harmonica players. But yeah, Little Walter definitely in my top 5 and an innovator. He's one of those game changers.
Okay.
Everything has like a guy who changes the game. Muhammad Ali with boxing, Wayne Gretzky with hockey, and to a lot of extent, Little Walter with the blues harmonica because he was one of the first guys to play right into the mic with his harp. Like he would press his harmonica right up to the microphone, and it was basically electric harmonica as opposed to acoustic where the mic's over here and you're playing back because you don't want to get the feedback and the reverb and the blowback. No, that's what they wanted because it worked with Muddy's guitar and it worked with that whole chest sound, that echo, the reverb, the kind of crunchy, gritty, kind of dirty blues
Absolutely,
that Chess was famous for. And Little Walter was basically one of those guys that developed that sound, and he and Muddy and Chess as a whole, but he and Muddy really sort of developed and cultivated that sound. And so definitely, I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Little Walter. There's just certain things that are hard to put your finger on, and it's really hard for me to put my finger on why I like Sonny Boy number 2 so much. Junior Wells, I think, would be my number 2 guy.
Yeah.
It's just their styles that kind of, but yeah, Little Walter was amazing.
Oh, very good. So I had no idea about the Junior Wells, sort of that James Brown R&B influence. That is huge. That makes such a difference. That's cool. I did not know that.
And Junior and Buddy went over with those blues packages overseas in the 60s too. And there's a couple of numbers that Junior does where he's not even playing harmonica. He's just singing and dancing, and he's dancing like James Brown.
Okay.
Yeah, he's doing all like the thing with the feet and the whole shuffle step and that whole bit. Yeah, he's doing all of that.
Now, it could be not a great question, but in terms of Buddy and Junior Wells, was there any falling out with those two, or like Junior Wells died fairly young, or was there?
He did die fairly young. They didn't necessarily have a falling out. It was so much as they were going different directions.
Just different. Okay.
They were both really big simultaneously as individual acts and as a duo. Like I said, they opened for the Stones a lot. And,
it just seems with so many of these duos or even brothers, there's always some sort of falling out. And I hate to ask that, but it's just interesting.
Buddy got to be really big. Like world big, world stage big. Whereas Junior kind of stayed US big, Chicago big. Okay. So eventually what happened is they did split, but they remained friends. It was just a professional split. And Buddy went off to do Buddy's thing. Junior kept doing his thing, but he teamed up with Buddy's brother, Philip Guy, who also is quite a good guitar player.
Oh, okay.
And basically toured around with Philip Guy and Fred Below on drums, and depending who on bass, maybe Dave Myers on bass or whoever, and did like the Chicago Blues Club thing. In fact, for a while they were the house band at Teresa's Hole, which was a blues club on the south side of Chicago.
Oh,
So
okay.
they played there actually 7 nights a week.
Wow.
So they do an afternoon show at some club, then they do their night show at Teresa's every night, 7 nights a week.
7 nights
But
a
during
week.
afternoons, they would play other gigs and stuff.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You just
So
don't see
yeah,
that anymore. The matinee concerts or the matinee
yeah,
shows at clubs that such a
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
almost feels like a bygone era, that sort of thing. Like the Beatles playing the Cavern at the lunchtime and then in the evening or
yeah, yeah,
whatever. Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a
exactly.
bygone kind of
Well, and
thing.
that's the thing is that's because they if they played for the lunch crowd because Teresa's Hole was not just a club; they had a full kitchen, full menu. So you know you'd get people that would go there
Yeah,
for lunch. So
yeah.
you're playing for the lunch crowd, so it's not empty. The place is packed.
Sure,
You're
yeah.
getting a percentage of the you get to wet your beak on the cover charge.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, plus back then, way more than now people would actually tip the band. The band would have a tip jar on the stage, and you could walk up to the stage and throw a $5 bill or a $10 bill or whatever in the band's tip jar, and that
Yeah,
was the band would keep all of that.
yeah.
And that goes way back to juke joints in the 20s and 30s, where if you went to see Charlie Patton play at some juke joint down on I don't know some plantation somewhere, like Dockery's Plantation in the 30s, and he wanted to request a song from Charlie Patton, he'd put a nickel or a dime in his tip jar and he'd say, "Play High
Mm,
Water Everywhere."
yeah.
And the next song he'd play would be High Water Everywhere. And
Okay.
that tradition carried on into the 70s in these blues clubs.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, you'd have a lunch show or a matinee, then you'd have a night show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
crazy.
wonder maybe post COVID, if we ever get out of this, maybe some of that will happen again. Like you'll have maybe more live shows in smaller clubs where you're having, a lunch or a matinee show and maybe
Yeah.
something in the evening. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, because that way they could, over two shows, a matinee show and a night show,
Yeah.
perform to the same size crowd in terms of head count.
Yeah.
So, the take at the gate would be the same, but it would just be spread over two shows because people have to social distance in the
Yeah.
club or whatever. And so let's say your place holds 100, but you're only allowed 50 people, then you do two shows at 50 apiece. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
doing one show of 100
Yeah.
head in the crowd, and it's a
Yeah.
win-win maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
a who knows.
Well, you
Fingers
heard it here
crossed.
first.
Fingers crossed. Hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah. If we ever get out of this. All right.
Can I talk about one more
You
chess
sure
alumni?
can. Absolutely.
I got to give a shout out to my favorite female blues artist. I would say she's the female version of Muddy Waters
Okay.
in her style of singing. Very aggressive, very Chicago blues is very macho, and Muddy Waters was very macho, especially with songs like "Mannish Boy." Even you mentioned Bo Diddley, even Bo Diddley with "I'm a Man." This was chess stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and again, this goes back to Leonard chess, not really thinking in terms of skin color, like we're all the same, right? So equal opportunity, basically, and Coco Taylor, man. Now, this isn't a chess record. This is on Alligator because she eventually went to Alligator, and I think she finished her career with Alligator.
I think so.
So this,
Yes.
so this is the Earth Shaker from
Love
Coco
it.
Taylor.
I
Man,
love it.
oh man, she doesn't play an instrument like Muddy. So Muddy played bottleneck electric guitar and acoustic six string. She doesn't play an instrument, but she doesn't need to, man.
Her
She can
instrument.
sing. A kind of a shouter like Muddy, the way she sings, very powerful,
Yeah.
a little bit kind of gruff and gravelly. Wasn't just the lead singer, she was the band leader. What she says goes for in terms of the set list and who gets paid what and the whole bit, what time you show up for rehearsal, all of that. Coco Taylor, man, very, very influential as well. Great
Yeah.
band. She's got like Pine Top Perkins there with her and Carrie Bell, and yeah, just who else is on there?
Yeah. Powerhouse. Is that an Alligator album, the one that you're showing there?
Yeah, this is an Alligator.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of her stuff from Alligator. Not so much her chess stuff, but her Alligator record stuff especially she often turns up in some of those Alligator compilation ones.
Yeah.
Every time that Coco Taylor song is going to blow the doors open. Like it's
Yeah, like
just
she, much like others, was brought to chess from Willie Dixon. Willie Dixon was staying at a hotel or a motel, and she was a chambermaid, and she was cleaning one of the rooms and just singing, either to herself or singing along to the radio. And Willie Dixon just happened to be walking by. The room door was open. She had her cart out there, and she was in there cleaning. And he hears her sing.
Oh
And
my
he
gosh.
literally walks, and how she tells us is he literally walks right up to her. And it's Coco Taylor. She's like 5'2",
Yeah,
cute little
she's
thing, right?
yeah, very tiny.
Willie Dixon, big like the
Yeah,
wolf, like
yeah.
6'2", 6'3", 300 plus pounds. Walks right up to her. Hey, little girl, I'm Willie Dixon. I really like the way you sing them blues. Why don't you come on over with me to Chess Records and try it out, kind of thing. And she was like, "What the hell is this guy? Get the hell out of here," kind of thing. She eventually goes with him, goes to Chess, does an audition. They love her. They do a test pressing. Sounds great. Rest is history. They sign her up on Chess, and she was with Chess for quite a while. I think until they basically folded, and then she went
Okay. Oh, I
to,
hadn't realized that. Okay. Because you don't
and I
often
think
see a
she
lot of
went
Coco Taylor
somewhere
stuff from
else.
Chess. Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, it's early stuff. It's like
Yeah.
60s stuff,
Yeah. Okay.
right? But on this record, what I like about it is a lot of the songs that she has recorded on this record are re-recordings of her Chess stuff.
Oh, okay.
So you get a little bit more of a modern production value on it, but it's still very bluesy, still true to that original sort of feel. But like songs like "Let the Good Times Roll" and "Spoonful," "Wang Dang Doodle," she had done
Wang
those for
dang doodle.
Chess,
Yeah, I was
and she
trying to think
does
of
it.
that song. That was the
Yeah,
song. That's
everybody's done "Wang Dang Doodle." Uh, but she does a song on here called "I'm a Woman." It's basically from the point of view of a woman, of I'm a man or mannish boy.
okay.
It's got that same da na 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 da na 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 na, but it's her. It's I'm a woman da na 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 na.
Okay.
Great, powerful, powerful voice.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, no messing around with Coco Taylor. My favorite for sure.
And again,
It's
one of those
Candy.
artists. I think you could safely say any Coco Taylor album you see is going to be pretty
It's
darn
going to
good.
be great. Yeah, it's
Okay.
going to be great. Whether it was Chess, I'm sorry it escapes me. There was another label somewhere in there that she was on for a brief period, and then Alligator. But yeah,
Okay.
any of that stuff is good for sure. Yeah,
Now, you
absolutely.
did a spotlight just recently where you mentioned Coco Taylor. This is on the BluesGuy vinyl channel where you mentioned Coco Taylor, but I was fascinated by who you had mentioned as a close second to Coco Taylor. It was an artist I was not familiar with at all. Is it Sugar? I can't even remember the artist's name.
Sugar Pie DeSanto.
Sugar Pie. I've never heard of that artist before, but you raved about her.
Sugar Pie DeSanto is, I think she was better than Etta James. She
Okay.
just somehow got overshadowed by Etta James for some reason.
This was,
Probably
I think, on your
because,
last live stream. I think this was.
yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was great. Great voice, a little bit more rhythm and blues than bluesy, whereas Etta James was more bluesy. And
Okay.
Etta James crossed over, right? And by crossover, I mean the white audience starts buying the music, right? Whereas Sugar Pie didn't necessarily cross over so much. And again, she was more rhythm and blues than blues, but Sugar
Okay.
Pie could sing. And again, a great entertainer, one of those stage presence type performers. And just a little thing like 5'1", like 95 pounds, cute as a button, but lots of sass and attitude and could really sing. Really,
Okay.
really great.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
going to have to seek out that artist based on that recommendation because it sounds fascinating.
yeah, Sugar Pie DeSanto.
Very good.
Got a couple more.
Yeah, let's do
Are
it.
we? Do we have time? Are we good?
I think we do. I think the
I
folks are enjoying
just
it.
I want to cover off some of the great Texas bluesmen, and then I want to cover off, of course, we can't forget the British blues.
Okay. All
And I
right.
want to
Sounds
cover
good.
off a couple of essential Texas bluesmen. We already talked about with Blind Lemon and stuff like that. That's not the really old stuff, the sort of 20s, 30s, and even some of the 40s stuff. Maybe I wouldn't recommend so much. It takes a bit of a trained ear to listen to some of the stuff. A lot of those records are compilations taken from scratchy old 78, so there's a lot of surface
Yeah.
noise and clicks and pops. It sounds like it's recorded through a tin can because they were literally singing into a tin can. So it takes a
Really?
bit more of a trained ear to hear some of that
Yeah, or
stuff.
a different appreciation for
And the
sure.
Blind Lemons and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
but a lot of great bluesmen came out of Texas.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, talk about Buddy Guy and his guitar playing, and he was a bridge between blues and rock. I would say Stevie
Oh,
Ray was also a bridge from blues to rock.
yeah.
Just he was a Texas guy, not a Chicago guy. That's all.
Hmm.
So getting really fast, more of a boogie woogie,
Yeah,
style
more of a jump.
instead of that,
Yeah,
yeah, instead of that Mississippi influence. But I mean, what I don't even have to really talk. I can't imagine anybody hasn't heard of Stevie Ray
yeah,
Vaughan, but definitely essential buying if you're a rocker and you want to get into the blues and you're into kind of those guitar slinger kind of guys. If your if your ear really perks up at some really good guitar playing, obviously for the Texas guys, I mean, you got to go with Stevie Ray.
yeah, yeah. And I don't.
And
It wasn't. He
another
wasn't.
member of the 27 Club too.
Yeah. Oh, is that right? Was he
Yeah,
27 as well? And
yeah,
with that crash, oh my
yeah.
goodness.
And a friend of
Wow.
Buddy Guy's. They were on the same tour actually when he
Yeah.
died. And Buddy
Yeah.
was kind of broken up about it for a while, as many people in the industry who were musicians and friends of his were.
Right.
The
Yeah.
shock.
He seemed.
Helicopter crash. Like what the hell, right? Like,
Yeah. That was so tragic. Now it's interesting when you have some of these guitarists that he was quite loved in the blues community, Stevie Ray, like quite loved and quite well accepted, like with Buddy
yeah.
Guys and John Lee Hookers. I've always found that fascinating with Stevie Ray, that I
Mhm.
think Jeff Healey was as well, but maybe not on the same level as
Well,
Stevie
Jeff Healey
Ray.
never got as big as Stevie Ray
Yeah,
did. A limited market being a Canadian, right?
yeah,
Um, whereas as an American breaking into the American market, obviously you've got a bit of a leg up over a Canadian trying to move from the Canadian market into the American market and then the world stage, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
I always say Jeff Healey is Canada's answer to Stevie Ray, and they've played together many times and jammed
Hmm.
together and performed together many times, and they didn't outshine one another. They complemented one another and supported one another.
Yeah, but yeah,
But
Stevie Ray, and he always gave props to the great blues artists. But I mean, there's that wonderful recording. Wasn't it done in Hamilton, or like with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Albert King? I think it was done. It was recorded actually in Canada. But that is just a
I think
great.
so. I
Yeah,
think it was. Yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
then
Like, oh,
there was a big tour in Canada where you had Jeff Healey, Stevie Ray, and I think it was Jeff Beck on the same ticket, on
okay.
the same show. I think it was Jeff Healey opens for Stevie Ray, and then it was Stevie and then Jeff Beck, or maybe it was Jeff Beck then Stevie or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
could you imagine that? Seeing Jeff Healey, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Jeff Beck in the same show? Talk about, I mean, your face would melt off. You would just have a skull. You'd look like Skeletor
Yeah.
when the show was over.
And I think with Stevie Ray Vaughan, I can't remember anyone that had a posthumous release that just really struck people with his release of Little Wing, his
Yeah,
instrumental version of
yeah,
that
yeah,
was released posthumously, like just after he died, or almost it almost came out just at that time. But man, when that
right.
came out, just the way people were like, oh, just listening to the sheer beauty of that
Yeah.
rendition was just amazing.
You know what? The other thing too, why I think he was so well loved by not only his fans but by other musicians, as you mentioned, is he was very humble. I mean, when he was on stage and stage took over, and whether he was on the booze or on the junk or had gotten clean, either way,
Yeah.
once he got onto the stage, I mean, the SRV Stevie Ray Vaughan took over, and then he'd go crazy and smile, play to the crowd, play behind his back and behind his head and all that. But he was very humble and actually very bashful and very shy,
Mm.
especially early on. And I think because he didn't sort of puff himself up and peacock around and put on airs and front that he was this great guy, even though he was so great, that I think a lot of people said, you know what, he's actually a sweetheart of a guy. Yeah, he'll cut heads on any stage with guitars, but he's very humble and very down to earth,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
think a lot of that had something to do with it, I think.
Yeah,
you
there you
know
go. And I'm just thinking now, somebody like Stevie Ray Vaughan, we were talking about Buddy Guy earlier, and then you got Jimmy Vaughan. Like you got some of these, which you don't think about the brothers or the siblings in these families that are,
That's right.
you
That's
know,
right. Yeah, because
wow.
Buddy Guy and Philip Guy, and Buddy Guy's real first name is George. Actually, it's George
Oh,
Guy and Philip Guy. So Buddy
okay.
Guy and Philip Guy, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimmy Vaughan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's lots like that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Fascinating.
And Texas bluesmen were great. I mean, I got to talk about Johnny Winter real quick.
Oh, please do.
So if you're into,
Please
obviously,
do.
again, if you're into the guitar slingers, again, right up there with Stevie Ray Vaughan, Buddy Guy, Jimi Hendrix, all them cats is Johnny Winter.
Johnny
This
Winter.
is Johnny Winter, which is his first album when he went to Columbia.
Okay.
So it's his first Columbia album, but not his first album. Of course, his first album is, I think, 1968's Progressive Blues Experiment. And the
Yeah, and I
cover is
just
that weird psychedelic looking
didn't know anything about that
cover.
until I watched your live stream about that project. I had no idea. I always thought it kind of all started sort of there, but I had no idea about that.
Yeah. I mean, he's always been a bluesman, but for a while he did sort of veer off into the rock and roll thing. But that was the music industry pushing him in that direction. They, at one point, they were like, we need an answer to these British
Oh
guitarists that are
yeah,
destroying everybody.
yeah.
We got this freaking Eric Clapton guy, we got this freaking Jimmy Page guy. We got all
Doing all
these,
their things with their.
we got this John Mayall guy. We got all these guys from Britain coming over and showing us up on how to play the damn blues. Stevie Ray's dead. What the hell are we going to do now, right?
Yeah.
Johnny Winter was the guy that, all right, this guy, he's like fastest fingers in the blues.
Yeah.
At that point, the reputation, he was known as fastest fingers in the blues. He was legit down-home bluesman, comes from Beaumont, Texas, comes from a long line of that blues tradition. Had his first band when he was like 15.
Okay.
Johnny and the something like Johnny and the Jukes or Johnny and the something like that. But just a kid. They released some 45s. Locally had some hits.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So like he was already a veteran musician by the time he was Johnny Winter.
Okay.
And he was accepted by the African American bluesmen because he was a misfit. As a kid, he didn't hang out with the white kids because they all made fun of him because he's albino, obviously. He and his brother both. And the black kids kind of made fun of him too because he's like super whitey, right? So he just went off in his own world, did his music thing, got into the blues, played blues over and over, noodling, practicing over and over. All of a sudden he emerges as this fantastic Texas bluesman in that boogie woogie tradition, blowing everybody away. Then guys like Muddy Waters start noticing him. He starts playing at blues festivals. The rest is history. Then he's all over the world, and he's just incredible. And you know, his band with Uncle Tommy Shannon, Uncle John Turner, just a great band. You know, on this album he's got Willie Dixon with him. He's got Big Walter Shaky Horton there with him as well, and then his bro Edgar Winter on this album.
Speaking of siblings.
So yeah, man, Johnny Winter, he's always in my top 5 blues guitarists. He's amazing.
Nice. And there's a few Johnny Winter's albums out there. There's more than I would have thought are available. Like a short career, fairly short career in terms of the grand scheme of things, but there's a few albums out there.
Yeah, and he took a few hiatuses, right, where he was sort of trying to find his place, and eventually when he sort of ditched the rock and roll thing and the whole, you know, Johnny Winter and the Rick Derringer thing and went back to just playing blues, then he really started to skyrocket again. And then he just, okay, I'm sticking to the blues, that's it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, he's got like 20 albums out or something.
Is that right? That many? Okay, wow.
It's got to be, because every time I think, oh, okay, I've got all his albums, I'm out digging and I see another one. I've never seen this one before. Plus, he's got his bootleg series that was tied to the Austin City Limits kind of deal too, right? So there's all of those too, which are super expensive and hard to find, but well worth it as well. Yeah,
and Johnny Winters, man, what he did for Muddy Waters in terms of Muddy Waters, I guess, and James Cotton, like in terms of that series, like Hard Again, and just so wonderful.
Yeah, he produced 3 Muddy albums, 2 studio and 1 live album.
Okay.
And then Muddy was on a couple of Johnny Winter albums. Like you said, James Cotton was on an album with Muddy that Johnny produced, and he was also on a Johnny album.
Yeah.
And I mean, Johnny and Muddy were personal friends too. So, you know, there's that interesting extra layer of dynamic that I think helps with the music. Is that they're musicians that support one another, but they're friends too.
Yeah,
you know,
that makes,
which is a
that
beautiful
is so
thing.
Cool. Very nice.
I got to quickly shout out Albert King and Freddie King as essentials too. The 3 kings of the blues, right? B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King.
Sure.
You gotta grab those. And most people are very familiar with B.B. King.
Yep.
Yeah, again, because he ran with Blue Circles and the rocker guys too a little bit. And BB was very influential on the British guys also. But you can't take anything away from the Stax recordings, especially of Albert King.
Oh my gosh!
Uh,
And that
in,
that one you're seeing quite a lot now. Born Under a Bad Sign? Is that the one?
yes,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
been reissued, and you're seeing a lot of
yes.
people in the VC picking that one up for sure.
That one's probably the one to pick up.
Yeah.
But basically anything, especially his Stax stuff,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then Freddie King is
Freddie
another
King. Yeah.
Texas bluesman, and was a favorite of Clapton.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just absolutely incredible
Yeah.
stuff.
Because of the Kings, you think BB King and Albert King, but sometimes Freddie King doesn't get the props that he deserved, like in
Yeah,
terms of the
yeah.
playing. And oh my gosh, so good.
For me personally, my favorite of the three Kings of the Blues is BB, and I've gotten into discussions with other members of the VC where they're like, you're crazy. It's Albert King, right?" Or
Yeah.
others say,
Yeah.
"What about
Right.
Freddie King, man? Freddie King blows them all away." And it's each to his own. And I end up eating shit sandwiches over saying the BB was the best. And I'll fight you for it.
This is going to have to be your next stream. You're going to have you, the BB King fan, have an Albert King fan and a Freddie King fan, and duke it out.
but I mean, all three of them are definitely the essentials for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, John Lee Hooker. You and I talked about John Lee Hooker earlier. This is probably one of his best albums, Boogie Chillin', because again, it's a comp of his early stuff and then his more modern stuff. But his biggest hits were Boogie Chillin' and Dimples. Even once you got into the 70s and 80s and the duets he was doing with Bonnie Raitt and Van Morrison, and those sold millions of copies and he won Grammys, but still his two biggest selling songs ever are Dimples and Boogie Chillin'. And Boom
good.
Boom to some extent too.
Yeah, Boom Boom, yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this has got King B on it and all that. So yeah, I mean, I quickly grabbed the one because I figured, well, I mean, everybody's heard of John Lee Hooker, but you still, as an essential, you got to recommend.
Yeah, for sure.
John Lee Hooker for sure.
Very
and again,
nice.
Another one of those guys that, he did electric stuff early on, then he recorded acoustic stuff later that sounds like it was done earlier than his electric. All over the map in terms of electric or acoustic and who he played with.
And aliases, and can he record it under like a bunch of different names as well?
Yeah, that was a big thing, especially in the 40s and 50s when it was a little tough. The contracts were, you basically signed your ex or your name. Yeah. A lot of these guys were, I hate to say it, but it was true at the time. A lot of these guys were illiterate, so they couldn't sign their name. They would just put an X, right? And I mean, your driver's license even back then didn't even have your picture on it, right? It was real easy for John Lee Hooker to go into VJ Records and record as John Lee Hooker, go down the street to, let's say, JVB Records, Joe Von Battle's label in Detroit, which is more of an independent blues label, and record as John Lee Booker instead of John Lee Hooker, or the Boogeyman.
Yeah, sure.
And come on, John, you're not fooling anybody. We recognize your voice. Nobody sounds like you.
It's like Clark Kent with the glasses.
And you don't keep proper time through the whole damn song either. Keep speeding up and slowing down.
That signature sound is,
Yeah, we can spot you and a mile away. You're not fooling anybody, John Lee. But yeah, tons of aliases. John Lee, I think 6 or 8 different aliases. And a lot of cats did that. Because they could
make some extra money.
You get a couple $100 per side at chess, and then you go down the street to VJ or wherever, and you even record the same song, just change the tempo a little bit, switch, verse 2 and verse 3 around.
Yeah.
Maybe change a couple of words in the chorus so it's different enough.
Yeah.
Record it as John Lee Booker.
Yeah.
Get another couple of $100.
Yeah.
So now you got 400 in your pocket instead of 200.
Yeah. Exactly.
Why not? Back then, if you recorded a record on a Monday, it would be out that Friday. And people would be listening to it that Saturday, Sunday, that weekend. Especially Chess, because they had their studios, their pressing plant, their shipping, everything was all in one building at 2120 South Michigan Avenue.
Yeah.
So, Muddy would go in and he'd record on Monday night or Tuesday morning or whenever the hell he felt like it, because he was always at Chess anyways. Muddy practically lived at Chess. Then they would, put the record through its production thing. They would press it, label it, send it out, and by Thursday night or Friday, the public could buy them
Yeah.
and party to them on the weekend.
Yeah. Now it seems like it takes years, and the whole process just seems to be in this instant world that we live in. Yet the whole process now seems to take so much longer.
Yeah,
that's
weird,
fascinating.
Man.
Well, that was fantastic. Then what a great blues primer. I mean, those are some great choices, Chris.
Oh,
well done.
Thank you. And
well
don't
done.
forget the British guys too, right? Roy Buchanan, Gary Moore. Hey, come on! I know you know this one. I know that you know this one, Jimmy.
Well, you never know.
Because I know you have this
one. Rory Gallagher.
Rory Gallagher, man, come on! I mean,
yeah.
You know what? I think he's my favorite of the imported blues artists. From overseas, French, British, Irish, Scottish, whatever, Canadian, whatever. He's my favorite of the non-American blues singers.
I'm fascinated by. Obviously, it's been a big reissue campaign, but I'm fascinated now that Rory Gallagher is really quite a darling of the VC. Like lots of people are buying, these reissues. But I mean, it's all about Rory Gallagher now. Like everybody seems to be totally getting into.
Was he in Taste before?
Taste,
was that his big? Yeah. And I'd seen Taste shown before, but and I'd had some Rory Gallagher, but not a lot Gallagher. But I think it was when you picked up this on I think you
CD.
had the CDs box, the CD box set, and I was like, oh
good.
Man, I think I'm going to get that. And
nice.
I ended up buying the LP, but what I should have done was actually bought both because the CD has songs the vinyl
extra
doesn't
songs.
have.
Yeah, it's almost a full extra CD or whatever. But
yeah.
Which can be so infuriating.
I should have done the Jamie Cottle box set King thing and bought them both. And I don't have a wife to answer to either, so I wouldn't have had to explain myself on that one. Why are you buying both? Because I'm the box set king, man.
Now, you've also got some great streams going on, because we should mention that you had that Johnny Winter stream, which was really fabulous. I really enjoyed
that was fun.
Johnny Winter and whatnot. Now, the only thing I'll say a postscript to that, because I thought you were going to have people, like you did have guests on, but I thought you were going to allow people to come on. So I had some Johnny Winters albums that I had all ready to go, but I was waiting, but you never opened up the streaming thing for that.
You know what? Yeah, I realized
not
later
to put
on,
you on the spot or anything like that.
No, that was my
No,
I realized later on that I forgot to share the link for the chat or for the stream in the chat. And also there was a screw up with StreamYard where when I set up the stream and the time and the whole bit, I set it as private. And then I make sure everything's okay. And then I create a little thumbnail picture and I upload that. And once I double check everything and it looks good, then I switch it from private to public. But I had either forgotten to do that or I did, but it didn't switch on StreamYard's end.
Yeah.
So, I forgot to share the link.
No. Don't apologize. I mean, you had the chat going, but I'll take this opportunity to show, because I don't think anybody showed this on your, this is my... True to the Blues, Johnny Winter story. So this is my
no one showed that one.
Johnny Winter's box set. So this came out a few years ago. This nice 4 CD set. Have you seen this one before?
I've seen you show it. I think, but I've never myself seen it.
Yeah, it's quite good. Like it's part of the the Sony Music when they were putting out a lot of these kind of box sets, and so it's really quite good.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
And then in April, you have a special that's coming up. Is that right? On the Blues or something?
Well, I try to pretty much every Sunday, late afternoon, early evening, if I can, do some kind of blues live stream. So usually I try to build it around some kind of theme. So, like when the Johnny Winter thing, because it was his birthday, I've done like the first day of spring. So I had blues songs that I did more like jump blues and up tempo type blues. So I have one that I'm going to do later today, actually. Which, if you don't have plans, I would love for you to jump in on it. And that's piano blues, because today I actually I've I've heard two things today, but I've also heard tomorrow is the official World Piano Day.
Yes,
So
yes, that's something like that. Yes, because I think
yes,
Mazzy has a video out about piano
yeah.
or something like that.
So I plan to do a piano blues stream later today, this
Later today.
afternoon.
Oh, okay. All right, there you
And
go.
then next Sunday, which is April the 5th, I want to say, double check, the 4th,
The fourth.
which is Muddy Waters' birthday.
Okay.
So that's going to be a Muddy Waters uh, stream, exclusively Muddy Waters.
Okay, very good.
Nothing but the mud for
Nice.
that stream. And again, if you've got any muddy, come on over and I'll. This time I will remember to share the link.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
But then, yeah, because Muddy was born in April, the beginning of April, and died at the end of April, I kind of do April as Muddy month. So not all of my content, but a lot of what I'm going to be doing through April is going to be centered around Muddy Waters.
Oh, very good.
So I've just finished editing a little mini documentary about Muddy Waters. It's about 15 minutes long.
Oh, very good.
I've got some Muddy Waters related, like top 5 this, top 10 that. Yeah, so that's what's going on for April. Plus, like I said, the Muddy Waters birthday blues bash live stream.
Love it.
Will be next Sunday.
Okay, well, we look forward to that. So lots coming up, and enjoying the live streams. You're enjoying them?
Yeah, and I do enjoy them, and it's a lot of fun. And depending on what sort of the theme is, sometimes I'll just kind of fly solo. Sometimes I'll invite people in to join me, depending on what I'm doing. I've only done about 8 or 9 here in the VC, but I used to actually be in the comic book community here on YouTube.
Okay, yes, I think you've mentioned that, yeah.
Which is also as huge, if not huger, than the vinyl community on YouTube. And a lot of live streaming. And I used to have another channel that was just comic books and graphic novels and that sort of thing. And I used to host live streams there. And sometimes you'd have like 6 or 8 people in, and you're all showing your Spider-Man or your Batman comics or whatever, right? So I was kind of an old hat at it from that, but I hadn't done one in a long time. So it's kind of fun to get back into doing it with the
Nice. Okay. Well, we should let you go and let you get ready for that for tonight. That's awesome.
Well, I've got a lot of time, but yeah, it's getting late for you. I mean, you're 2 hours ahead of me there. So
yes, that's true.
It's probably getting close to dinner time for you. It's
yeah, it might be. Well, this was awesome. Well, this was absolutely awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. And again,
it was a lot of fun.
Blues Primer, there's some great recommendations there. I'll try to remember to leave a list of some of the recommendations, and I will, of course, leave a link to your channel so people want to check you out. You deserve many more subscribart than you have right now. Get on to the blues. Get on to.
I don't know about all that, but thank you. I appreciate that.
No, you absolutely do. Absolutely do. Great part. You are the blues station or the blues location for the VC for sure. Absolutely.
That's nice. I'll take
absolutely.
Thank you very
much.
BluesGuy
vinyl. All right. Well, so that's going to wrap it up for this one. And I'll just.
Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And I know this is probably going to upset some of the Leaf fans or whatever, but.
Screw Leaf fans.
All right. So that's going to.
The NHL's in a weird state when the Oilers and the Leafs are doing well. We'll just leave it at that.
Exactly. And on that note, thanks very much, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie.
We'll chat again soon.